One in mock trial. This, when you're a lawyer, when you're doing a trial, this is your instrument. You bring your instrument just as much as you bring basketball shoes to play basketball. You bring your writing utensil. You bring paper to write with to come to mock trial practice. If you're expecting to have a tutorial, you've got to have what? Not even a photographic memory, just a incredible memory to remember everything I talk about. So please, in the future, please come prepared. Okay, so I think that Mrs. Gaffney wanted to talk about when would be the next date. So the next date, I mean, I would really like to do the tryouts next Tuesday. We're already a week behind from what we originally planned, but even with the snow, it works out with what we've normally done in the past. So next Tuesday is what date?
Next Tuesday.
It's the day after Martin Luther King Day.
I think the
18th.
18th.
No,
It's the 16th, Mom.
Yeah,
16th?
The 16th?
Yeah. well,
All right. And what time did we say would be good? How is Tuesday for everybody? Next Tuesday.
Early Tuesday works.
Okay,
better.
let me ask this question. Can anybody not do Tuesday after school? Okay, good. We're gonna make it at, we can do 4 o'clock. Okay, all right.
Do we want Tuesdays at 4 to be our regular time for a
I
meeting?
think the callbacks might be Tuesday
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they
Call
are.
box.
for
the
play.
Yeah, but those end at 4.
Oh, you do end
And
at
we'll
4.
find out what time your callback time is, and it won't be the exact same time.
Alright.
You're not gonna, when you do the tryouts, it's, 4 minutes,
Well, yeah.
you know what I mean? And you're in the building, so it should all work out, okay? So, next Tuesday, January 16th, 4 o'clock. Are we doing tryouts in this room? Is that the plan, or do we want to do it in one of the classrooms?
We can do it in my room, and then we can have everyone in here.
Okay, all right, so what you'll do
Is that
is
good?
you'll come in the classroom, first come, first serve, sign in, and then you can go to the library, okay, until your name is called, all right? So,
Bring something, homework, something to read, something productive.
or you could be practicing to yourself and looking at what you're gonna be doing instead of chatting with your friends. So, all right, this is what I expect you to bring me that day. Mr. Richardson, you need to have your opening statement typed on a regular 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, double spaced. Okay? I want 2 copies so that one for you to look at, okay? And one for me to look at and to keep, okay? Please, at the top of your paper, put your name up in the corner, right-hand corner, and put your grade, okay? I'll remind you again that this is your own work product. Do I want you to maybe have your older brother and sister listen, or your parents listen to you? Sure. Maybe say to you, oh, you should stop saying because, or whatever. Sure. But you write this, okay? And if you don't write it, I'll be able to tell. You don't need to memorize this, okay? But you need to be familiar enough. I'd love to see some eyes instead of this the whole time, you know. All right, so I want you to look up every once in a while from that paper. So you got to read through it a few times. That's what I said. When you're on deck, when you're waiting to do it, nothing wrong with looking through it beforehand. Okay. The delivery is very important. So, what don't I want in your mouth while you are doing your opening statement? Yes.
Gum.
Yes. Don't be chewing gum. Ding, 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 ding. That's a huge problem. What do I want to hear at the end? Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Say thank you, even if you're nervous. Make that a rule in your life. If you're nervous, last thing you should say to somebody is thank you. Try it, okay? So just because you're nervous doesn't mean you don't say thank you. If you have to write it in big letters at the bottom of your paper, then do it. But I'm really shocked at the people that don't say thank you. I'm like, let's see, a judge or a coach or a teacher listened to you for almost 4 minutes and you didn't even say thank you. So say thank you at the end, all right? So now you know what your end's gonna be. Thank you. Okay. I already gave away something. All right. So delivery is important as to, as far as the placement on the team. All right. So that's some of the part of what you have to bring that day. Do you have any questions about what you have to bring? No? All right. One of the reasons why also I want you to have that all typed up is because down in Columbus, we are absolutely not to have and to use any iPads, any computers, anything. So you might as well get used to it now. This is going to be a paper thing. So that's what it is. Okay? If you guys have problems printing out, you can come to school and ask to use the printer. Okay? You'll be allowed to do that. All right, let's go into what it is to do an opening statement. Raise your hands if you did this last year. Okay, so I'm going to be picking on you guys, be asking you some questions. All right. Where the person on trial is a girl, and she's getting tried for what? Yes.
A murder.
That's right, she's getting tried for a murder. All the witnesses, while we can put in girls, what are all the witnesses? Yes.
Male, men.
Yes, they are. They are. So understand that I may be looking at some of that. So I may be using a lot of the guys to be the witnesses. Okay? If you're not, if I choose you and you play a male part, I mean, these are guys that are on a ship or whatever. When we did this several years ago, and we did have a couple girls that had those kinds of we had them, because a lot of pirates have long hair, so they just put their hair like in a, just, like a rubber band thing, and just tied it behind, and that's how they went. So it worked out really well because they were sort of like pirates. So, but the one that we did a few years ago that was the same story, Charlotte Doyle, was different because there was actually a different witness. So it was a good thing I read this and I compared it and I was right. There was a different witness. How many of you read the book? Honestly. Okay. So remember Mr. Grummage in the book? Well, he was a witness before. And now in this one, he's not a witness. So she doesn't have the guy that friends with her family and knew her, you know what I mean, and basically was one of her witnesses. We don't have that. Okay. So let's talk about opening statements. This is a, we're gonna go look off of this one, this opening statement thing, the outline. Okay, you can take notes from there. So I like what it says about what the purpose is, all right? It provides a roadmap. But the first thing is, you have to start the case out. And basically the rules of mock trial say for you to all start it out the same way. That you're supposed to start it out by introducing yourself, your co-counsel, and your witnesses, okay? So, if you are doing the prosecution, okay, so you're the one that's trying to find Charlotte Doyle guilty of murder, are you going to be calling, now I don't have the packet, she does. So are you going to be calling Grimes? Right? So if you're trying to find her guilty of murder, are you going to be calling Grimes? If you're the prosecution. Yes, no? You look through this? It's a yes. All right. So when you start this, you need to introduce yourself, your co-counsel. So when you're doing it for the mock, for this, when we say, you know, good afternoon, my name is Katerina Cook, and I would like to introduce my co-counsel, Jacob Cook. And we will be calling as witnesses today, you know, Mr. Dillingham, who's played by so-and-so, so, you know, go ahead and put that in. You can make up what you want, if you want to, okay? But do put that part in, because you're gonna need to do it anyhow. So we'll just plug it in later. So you guys have read the packet, right? Who wants to prosecute Charlotte? Meaning, who wants to see Charlotte go to jail? 1, 2, 3. All right. 4. All right. So I need. It's not a good idea to have all these people defending Charlotte and all these people, you know, and too few people who are doing an opening statement for prosecution. So think hard, you know, think about it, but by the end of the time we talk, I want you to write P or D next to your name, okay? But I would like you to make that commitment now and then go with it. I will tell you, I've always told people, a lot of times people are like, oh, well, I really like Charlotte and I really want to defend her, but it might be easier to prosecute her, okay? So, and sometimes people, you know, will switch as the more they're getting into it about which side they want, but you should already have an idea about which side you want to, you know, do for your opening statement. And the reason why I'm asking, like, sort of an even Stephen as far as who is signing up for each, you know, part, is that I don't want it to be like, well, I really like this person as an attorney. Now they have to write a whole other opening statement. All right? That's not a good idea. Okay? So, and chances are we probably won't do that anyhow because we could probably use the other person's opening statement. But just in case, I'd like to have sort of an even amount of defense openings and prosecution openings. Yes, Jacob?
We also have to account there's a lot of people not here.
Okay. So what do they do? I don't know. I guess they'll all be timekeepers and bailiffs, huh? What a thought. Okay. So, remember, I just gave you what you're going to start with. Good afternoon. My name is Katerina Cook. This is my co-counsel. Today, you know, the witnesses that we will be calling to testify, Mr. Dillingham, Mr. Grimes, I'm just saying off the top of my head, and then go on with what you're going to say, okay? Remember what I said, it provides a roadmap of the trial. It doesn't tell you, like, you know, that the bathroom is in the McDonald's, you know, at the back of the store, okay? So, roadmap, that means be general. When you prepare your case, you're to make a sheet with 2 columns. Make one side with the favorable facts and law for your side, and the other side with the unfavorable. All right, just so you have an idea about what's going on. They want you to find a theme that fits the case. And they gave you a couple ideas here: freedom, safety, justice, fairness. You know, is there something from the book that really grabbed you about what they had to say about Charlotte Doyle? If so, use it. I mean, there's something as far as a prosecution what you could say about Charlotte Doyle. I mean, what's a bad thing you could say about Charlotte Doyle?
So are you allowed to use like parts of the book in the case, like when you're, you know, you asking questions to your the witnesses and when you're doing cross?
Like, oh, I got to get this done. Start to think about it now, and start to think about what would be interesting for you to hear about. Think about a movie and how does a movie start, and what grabs you about a really good movie. How do they start? And then start your opening statement that way once you introduced it to everybody, okay? But a lot of times my best ideas come in places and times when I am absolutely not focused on thinking about what I'm supposed to write. So just let, you know, like if it hits you, you know, try to remember it because it'll probably be a really good idea, okay? So it says outline what occurred and what the evidence from each witness will show. Yes, you need to do that, but like I said, try to do it in a way that's really interesting. It says analyze the statute and how it applies to your case. Now the statute that we're talking about, oh, and that's what, does everybody have one of these packets? Yes? Do they?
Does anyone need
If
one?
you do, you don't have it with you? Okay, well then, what I want you to remember to do though is,
Can you just take a picture there and send it back?
okay, what I want you guys to do though is start with the case summary page, okay? And that's like the fourth page, it's on the back side of a page. Okay. All right, start by numbering your pages there and number them all the way through, okay? So that when I refer to a page, you know the number. I wish they'd number these things, they never do. So 1 is case summary, 2 at the top is issue.
Go ahead and number them through.
3 would be the facts. Arguments of the case should be page 6. 7 is Keach, not Kitch. Like somebody we know, Jacob. So 16 is Charlotte Doyle, so. And if I'm misnumbering them, let me know. Should be 26 pages. Is that what we all got? All right, on page 2, it says statutes and definition of crimes. You need this stuff right here. This is really important stuff, okay? So, do you have to like define, do you have to say what the person's being charged with? Yes, you do. You don't necessarily need to use every single part of it, but I would use, you know, what you think you need to use. Maybe you could just stick with, you know, murder is, you know, is defined as no person shall purposely cause the death of another. Okay, you could put it that way. But it also talks about, if you look at your prosecution, all right, there's something that really sort of worries me about this statute, which says that regardless of what the offender intends to accomplish thereby. Geez. So what that means to me is, what does it mean to you? You think, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say to you is it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody necessarily intended, maybe, to stick a knife in this guy's back. And that even if they didn't intend to stick a knife in this guy's back, they can still get charged with murder. That's a pretty low thing to have to prove for the prosecution, right? If I were the prosecution, I would be like waving that one around, you know, saying, look, we don't even have to, you know, prove that she intended to do it. Okay? Burden and degree of proof. So, that also needs to be there for the defense. It's really important to prove, and they have the definition of reasonable doubt. Let's see. So that's like 4 lines up. There's a definition of reasonable doubt. Who wants to read that for me? Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
burden and degree of proof. Every
Just,
person.
hang on, just read 4 lines up.
Reasonable doubt does not mean possible doubt because everything relating to human affairs or depending on moral evidence is open to some possible or imaginary doubt. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof of such character that as an ordinary person would be willing to rely and act upon it in the most important matters of their life.
Okay. That definition of reasonable doubt is really what the definition is in the state of Ohio, reasonable doubt, what they go to trial for in murder cases here, okay? So that, when you talk about reasonable doubt, it doesn't say no doubt, okay? It says reasonable doubt. So when you're the prosecution, that is a very heavy burden. It is the heaviest burden that there is as far as in a court case. So if you're a defense, you're going to say, this is the heaviest burden there is. And they can't meet that burden. Okay, that's what you want to be saying if you're defending Charlotte Doyle. If you're prosecuting her, should you say what the burden of proof is? Sure. And that's where you talk about, that's the degree of proof, okay? That sounds a little bit confusing. As we go along, it'll be easier to understand. If you understand it, use it, especially the ones from last year and saw how it worked. I would expect you guys to try to put that in there as far as the burden of proof, okay? Because the burden of proof is given to the court so that they know how they're supposed to review the case, okay? There's clear and convincing evidence. It'd be hard for me to sit there and go, I think you might make a good attorney, because we have to beef up your thing a lot more, okay? It comes to usually about 2.5 pages that's double-spaced typewritten, okay? That's what I've normally seen as far as, when you read it, and it should come to about 4 minutes, okay? All right. So, those are definitely, it's required to have that in there. All right. So, and like I said, there's the statute there too. You're going to use that in your opening statement also. So I'm already giving you a lot of things that you're going to be using as elements in your opening statement. All right. So you can see, number C says, use a summary of the case, no more than 30 words. Format, may it please the court. See, you said it right there. You can talk about the issue in the case today. All right. Speaking of issue in the case today, well, we'll talk about that in a minute because I want to look at this book that I have used in law school. I'm going to refer to that in a second. All right. Refer to what the evidence will show. Briefly identify each witness and relate to the case. Now, here's what I don't want you to do. Do not go talking about the other side's witnesses. You have no idea what they're going to say. Okay? You only know what your witnesses are going to say. So just stick with your witnesses and describe what they're going to say. And don't go on and on about it, just, okay? Do you understand why? Because you have no idea what the other side's going to say. It'll all come up in the trial testimony. You will know, if you're a good attorney and you've prepared your witnesses well, you will know what each of your witnesses are going to testify to. So just stick with that. Now, if any of your witnesses have something that, they've got a tragic flaw, they got a character problem, there's something they may have done, better you get it out soon enough in the opening statement and say it your own way, than let the other side bring it to light and make you look like a liar. Yes, Jacob?
Like last year, we had some interesting cases where people tried to call expert witnesses when that's not even allowed.
Right. That was down in Columbus.
That
That was
was
a lot
some
of fun.
funny
That was so
stuff.
fun.
That was the highlight.
Jacob goes,
Okay, so see number
Objection.
4? It says
Objective.
cover elements of proof. Explain the burden of proof. We already talked about that. And then at the end, you've got to tell the court the specific relief you want. So, if you're the prosecution, what do you want to have? Oh, I have to explain this part. Let's go to the beginning. Sorry. I forgot about it. So, page 2 again, we talk about the issue, all right? It's right above statutes and definitions of crimes. So, read, the prosecution has requested,
Not my package.
you don't have your packet, all right. Who's got their packet? Caroline, page 2, the paragraph above, statutes and definitions of crimes.
The prosecution has requested that Charlotte Doyle, a juvenile, be
Adjudicated,
adjudicated,
practice that, you'll need it.
a delinquent child, and in support of that request, we will prevent evidence to prove beyond.
Oh, I'm sorry, oh, guys, fix that.
It's really
present, it's present. Thank you, I'm glad you did that, because I fixed it on my copy at home. Should be fixed on yours, right? Yeah, we'll present evidence.
To prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Doyle is guilty of murder for purposely causing the death of First Officer Hollybrass.
Right. So, instead of convicting them and finding them guilty, okay, like an adult, Charlotte Doyle is your guys' age. She's a juvenile. If you guys were tried in juvenile court, you would be adjudicated a delinquent. You would not be found guilty. Okay? Juveniles don't get found guilty. You know why? Why don't juveniles get found guilty?
Because they're kids.
Well, partly. Jacob,
Because they're not getting charged in a adult courtroom.
keep going. Yes?
They don't go to jail, they go to juvenile detention.
Yeah. Yes? Anybody else know? What happens here, which is actually what happens for real in a juvenile case? You don't have a, what kind of trial? What do we not have for a juvenile, Jacob?
Jury trial,
Jury, exactly.
bench trial.
There is no jury trial, so they don't get found guilty, all right? So, adjudicated a delinquent child. Those are magic words. You want to have that in your opening statement. All right. So I wanted to make sure you got that, because that's what, as a prosecution, that's what you're asking for. You should have that in there in your opening statement. Put a star there. Okay. All right. And then when you're a defense counsel, what do you want? Yes, Jake.
You want her to be dismissed?
Yes, you want the case to be dismissed. Now, in Ohio, okay, we have a finding, instead of guilty and not guilty, for juveniles, we have a finding of true and not true. Okay? So you could say, we asked the court to find, Charlotte Doyle, the charges that not true of the charges, and that the case be dismissed. You could say something like that. Yes.
So saying guilty in our opening or closing statement would be incorrect?
Yes, do not say guilty. Do not say not guilty. Okay? All right. Let's see, Mr. Richardson. Okay, additional advice. Let's see. It's the first impression of the team. Let's see. Be careful not to overstate the case. Oh. All right, so it talks about call client by name, but use label for opponent such as plaintiff or defendant. Okay, actually it would be in here, it would be actually prosecutor. Oh, no, it is plaintiff, no, it's not plaintiff. It would be, she would be the,
Charlotte Doyle would be the defendant, I guess, normally.
she'd be the defendant, and then there'd be the prosecutor.
Prosecutor,
Right,
yeah.
Right, so she's the defendant. If you're the prosecution, you're gonna refer to her as the defendant. You're gonna refer to her as Miss Doyle. You're not gonna call her by her first name, when people do tryouts to actually get to an argument, all right? All right, now let's go to the next one. That's this opening statement, helpful hints. There's ones for opening statement for defense and prosecution. See what it says on number 2? There's a, look, you just check that off. Make sure you did those things. All right. There's no documents to be introduced, so don't worry about that. Look at what you're supposed to avoid as a prosecution. Too much detail. Remember I said it can get boring. Exaggeration, overstatement. Look at what they says. Don't use such phrases as prove it to a mathematical certainty or prove it absolutely beyond question. don't go overboard to the point that you don't think you can prove that. Okay, I talked about argument. Try to avoid anticipating what the defense attorney will say, all right? You can anticipate what they, like a defense, but I wouldn't get too much into detail because you only have so much time to bring on your case, okay? And they say avoid walking or pacing. Usually you guys are so nervous performing your opening statement, you're clutching the podium, so I don't really worry about that. Okay, opening statement for defense.
Like a roller
All right.
coaster.
Let's see.
They call me the grinder.
Alright, so he says, facts tend to okay, so see what it says for opening statement defense, facts tend to weaken the plaintiff's case. Avoid repetition of the facts that are not in dispute, exaggeration argument, avoid strong points of the plaintiff's case. Okay, alright, so there's that. So do you guys have any questions so far? And Mr. Richardson, is there anything that we need to cover I am gonna cover some things in Mowat to go over, an outline. Okay, one of the things I want to talk about really quick is to talk to you about how important the opening statement is, and I know I'm already in the middle of it, but there is a theory, we have talked about it before last year, with the people who are the second years here. It's the theory of primacy and recency. Remember that? You guys remember it? We used it for picking the witnesses in the order that the witnesses went. Do you remember why? Caroline?
Primacy is like the first thing you heard, and then recency is the last thing you heard.
That's right.
And
That's
you
right.
remember the last thing wasn't the first thing.
Well, the theory is that, for example, if you want to tell something about your case that you don't want them to really remember, you stick it in the middle, where you bury it. Yes.
Like you do someone who's sort of got a shady history, super shady history, and then you're done with a good person.
You're done with a good person. Yeah, you can.
So it's like you got the shady lawyer, the drug dealer, and then the priest.
And then the priest.
That really explains.
That's interesting. All right. So it's a psychological phenomenon, and basically the theory of primacy is that the initial impressions often become lasting impressions. So you've got to make your opening statement catchy and interesting for the judge so that they want to like you. And if they like you, they'll like your client. Okay? I've seen a lot of times where juries will not like the attorney and that poor client is suffering for it. So you want to be interesting, you want to be pleasant, even though the subject is pretty heavy, but you want them to remember what you have to say. And poor defense counsel, poor defense attorney has a lot to try to overcome when the prosecution is always first in the trial. So you have the advantage. You always have that home court advantage as a prosecutor because you're the one that gets to go first, okay? So use it to your advantage. Do not bore the judge to death. Okay, thank you. All right. So, elements, of course, we talked about stating the facts. Don't make anything up. That's a big no-no here. Do not make up anything. Be clear, forceful, and positive. Now, that especially goes, so what I want here is when you're writing your opening statement, you can write it. Please write it, type it up, and then print it off and stand there and read it to somebody. Read it in the mirror, but read it out loud. Because you're going to find out sometimes that your sentences are going to be unmanageable. You might want to use huge words, like adjudicated.
Objective.
Well, objective hopefully isn't that big.
Objective.
But if you can't pronounce a word, and if you don't say it correctly, then you just sound dumb, okay? The other thing is a lot of you guys have appliances like braces, retainers, that kind of stuff in your mouth, and a lot of that going on. I get that. You're 7th and 8th graders. Try to keep that in mind when you're speaking, okay? So if there's certain words that are going to make you sound, like I've got a bunch of metal in my mouth, maybe try a different word. It's possible. This is the English language, so, Go look in the dictionary. Come up with like, there's might be 5 other words to use for the one word that make you sound like, you're having a hard time with what you got going on in there. All right? So, understand, I don't have a problem with it. All right? And that's what everybody has. I wish I had braces when I was your age, but, it is what it is. Okay. So, that means you should try to make your sentences relatively short and staccato, okay, so they're interesting.
I suck.
Okay. All right. So, do not be argumentative or state personal opinions. So, I do not want to hear I think. I really don't want to hear many I's. Try not to use I. I don't care what you believe. Don't use I believe. Okay? It doesn't fit here. Don't state your personal opinions about the case. Like, I really think Charlotte is a really nice girl and nobody should find her guilty and put her in an awful jail. No, you don't get to say that. Okay? I'm sure you guys have all learned how to write in the third person, so you can do that. You could say, my co-counsel and I firmly believe that, blah, blah, we will be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Yes, Jacob.
Well, I think you forgot to adjust that when we write our paper. Shouldn't we just write co-counsel?
Pardon me?
Should we write co-counsel? Should we write and co-counsel or just ourselves?
What you...
In the opening statement.
No, you should say, and when you introduce yourself, you can say, and my co-counsel, and you make somebody up. I don't care if you say Mickey Mouse. Overstate. Describe only your witness's testimony. Remember I said? Do not make promises you cannot deliver. So, even if you think like, that the other side has this witness and they don't, they have something dirty in their past or might not be that good, what if it doesn't come out in the trial? That's not your witness. So, you don't want to prove or say something, I will prove to you, and then not deliver, okay? Because the judge is going to be looking for it. All right. I talked to you already about personalizing your client. So, just as much as for defense, you're going to personalize Charlotte Doyle.
Name is Charlotte.
Poor young.
She's had a sad life.
Yes, she's had a sad life. She had an awful journey, and now she gets to get this when she's on land. You're going to talk about Holly Brass and how he didn't deserve this kind of death. Yeah, and if you're prosecution, right? You're gonna talk about that. All right. Let's see. So. Oh, I know what I want to talk about. There's something called narrative versus witness testimony. Narrative versus witness testimony is more like when you're doing a narrative, you're more like telling a whole story. When you're doing witness testimony, you're specifically identifying what each witness is going to say. Okay? So it all depends on how you feel about the case. If you think that your case is really, let's see how they describe it. Okay. You have to picture your evidence. Which method of picturing your evidence will more effectively present your particular case? So the witness testimony form is usually preferable when your case hinges on one principal, largely uncorroborated witness, because this form will most likely parallel that witness's subsequent testimony. Does that sound like anybody here? Whose testimony was uncorroborated? What did one person say that nobody could say for sure what really happened? Yes, Jacob.
Charlotte?
That's right. Why? Yes.
Because she's the one that's being accused.
And think about the scene.
She was the only one there.
Right? And what did everybody else say about her? About whether or not Charlotte did it?
They weren't there, so they wouldn't know.
Right. So there was no eyewitnesses, right? So maybe you want to go that way if you're doing defense.
She has no alibi though. That's like the only thing. She has no one to clarify what happened. Like she has no one that can tell her.
You're right. She doesn't have an alibi witness, okay? But she can say she was someplace else, right? Yes, Jacob.
So, back to reading the book. In the book, I only grazed over the packet. And does it address that Zachariah was still alive and in
So
the
does the
hole?
packet.
It does.
Yeah, Zachariah is one of the witnesses.
Okay, got my point ready.
Okay,
Thank
good.
the Lord.
I'm happy for you. All right, the other part is witness testimony. It says that form is usually preferable. No, we talked about witness testimony. Hang on, there it is. On the other hand, the narrative form is usually preferable where you have several witnesses who corroborate that's a word that's very hard for me to say, each other. So the narrative form might be good for prosecution. So you're going to tell a story, but you don't necessarily have to say each person said that. Because at the end you could go, they all agree, you know what I mean, that Charlotte is guilty. That they believe Charlotte's guilty. Okay? All right. How and when to volunteer weaknesses. Where, however, the weakness is apparent and known to the opponent, you should volunteer it as soon as possible. If you don't, your opponent will with twice the impact. How do you volunteer the weaknesses? The key is to mention the weakness without emphasis and present it in the least damaging light when it will blend easily into the story. Okay? So, we have, let's see, the witnesses. There was one that I really thought might, who do you guys think? Okay, so you read the story or you read the packet. Who do you think is the one that really put a knife in his back? Yes.
Zachariah.
I think so. Who else could it have been? Yes.
Captain Jaggery.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
You think Jaggery would have killed Hollybrass?
Jaggery and
Yes.
Holly.
I agree with Mary Kate because there's proof that Jaggery was really mean to his crew members and treated them like a piece of garbage.
But wasn't Hollybrass the only one that he got along with?
Oh,
No one ever saw them get along, though.
Yeah, but he was his first mate. He was his right-hand man. Who stood, okay, let me ask you this question. Who stood to benefit the most if Hollybrass was dead? Yes.
The second mate.
Whose name was?
Peach? Peach or Meech?
That's my field, okay?
Keach.
So, I'm just throwing it out there. If you think about it. Yes.
And I know, and I would think why, because Keach wasn't getting along with the captain, but Hollybrass was.
Right. Right.
So.
See, it doesn't necessarily work, guys.
Keach
Just
is
so
a
you know,
witness.
like if you knew anything about Admiralty law or the way the ships worked back then. Being a captain was like a huge deal, and they might have even gone to school for that and everything. But making the jump from first mate to captain was a difficult thing. They would sooner find another captain, okay? So Hollybrass, if Jaggery stays alive, Hollybrass is going to get to go with him every time, okay? Whereas Jaggery can pick who he wants for his subordinates. So Keach stands to win if Hollybrass is out of the picture. And I believe, wasn't Hollybrass the outsider? Wasn't Keach part of going on different...
He was part of the Red Robin.
The Round Robin?
Round Robin.
Round Robin.
The Red Robin.
That's a restaurant.
Red Robin is the
I saw
You hungry, Jacob?
No, I saw a commercial. Don't judge me. Dang it, we failed my term.
Oh.
I'm gonna keep saying
Last year
Red
was
Robin.
objective, now it's Red Robin.
Now see, that's one thing, is that we should really figure out where in the book, in Charlotte Doyle, that they describe the Round Robin, and make sure that we go
He
over
pulls it
that
out of the
again.
Bible.
Pardon me?
He pulls it out of the Bible.
What's a weakness that we want to hide about Charlotte? That's a couple of them. Yes,
She has the knife.
she has a knife. What else do we want to hide? Or bury?
She carries herself a little bit more pompously, like she's a brat.
Right,
so
right.
she
But
has
that, does that really?
reputation.
But does that really matter as far as? And you might be able to play that well for her advantage in this case. And why would that be?
For what?
If you defended Charlotte.
Oh, that she was of higher class and would have not wanted to be involved with anything like that.
Exactly. That's not how she grew up, right? Yes, Jacob.
Holly Brass was one of the captain's only friends who was somewhat of higher class. So if he died, she could maybe make friends with him. Again.
Okay. What's something you really want to bury about Charlotte? Yes.
She became part of the crew.
And by doing that, but where was she first?
She was the only passenger.
And whose table was she sitting at the beginning? Yes. No.
She was in the kitchen with Zachariah, and then she went to the captain's quarters for tea after.
Right, and a lot of times, that's how the days went by, yes, and,
She
and
went
so,
for 30 minutes a day for tea.
okay, but what were they talking about? People?
The crew.
Yes, so what was she?
She was a spy.
She was like a snitch, or spy, a narc,
Insider.
whatever you want.
A double.
She wasn't necessarily, she hadn't yet picked a side, okay? She was sort of, you know, and she was, I mean, no matter what, isn't that really sneaky?
Yeah.
That's something you want to hide. If you're defending Charlotte, you want to hide that the way she went from captain and telling the captain about the crew to then turning and changing her loyalties, which they talk about a lot in the book, to then going to the crew. Okay? So that change of loyalty, people that do that, can they be trusted, you think?
No.
Is that a good thing to play on if you're a prosecution?
Yes.
Yes. The thing is can you trust Charlotte Doyle? You know? And do you want somebody you can't trust out in the community? Yes.
I think that with the whole thing about the captain not liking her anymore, it was way more explained in the book than in the packet.
True.
In the packet, they just braze
But
over.
you said you hardly read the packet.
I did, but I read some key parts.
Okay, yes.
Wouldn't so like you said you want to bury it, but what
If you're defending Charlotte.
Yeah, I understand, but like if like you don't want to risk the prosecution getting that out, like getting like maybe taking that in your putting that in your opening statement, or just kind of staying as far away from it as you can.
I would say that you're probably going to see the prosecution using that about how she was like a spy, or she couldn't be trusted, or something like that. Now, how could you turn that around as defense counsel?
You could say, well, as an outsider to a crew she's never met before, she wants to just fit in and feel accepted by the crew, something like that, like playing her as the innocent one.
Innocent, yes. Keep going with innocent. So, say you go to a new school, right? And the people that you're at the new school, right? You see the ones that dress like you and have decent shoes and have a sort of a haircut, right? And you think that those people are the good people and they have good morals because you look like them and you have good morals. It's what we all do in a group of people. We usually gravitate towards those that we are most comfortable with socioeconomically. Whether or not, people might think that that's politically incorrect, but you know what? Sociology will show you that you usually go to what you're like,
Yeah.
Okay. But you find out that they're really snobby or crappy, or maybe they did something to you, you know what I mean? And then you end up going and seeing a group of people that, maybe have purple hair and a few more earrings, and a couple tattoos. But you find out that those people are actually real, and they're helpful, and they will be loyal to you, and they will, do things for you, okay? So what do you think happened there? I mean, when you walked in the school, what were you? You said the word. You were
Outsider.
An outsider.
You were an outsider, but you were an innocent.
Yeah.
She was innocent. She was young. She was inexperienced. She didn't know the ways of the world. You know what I mean? So, if you're defending Charlotte, you're going to say, yeah, they're right. She did seem to do that, but that's what was expected out of her, and that's what she thought that she had to do. Yes.
And the book has a great quote when she says he was above higher class, and I liked it.
Right.
As the quote
Right.
goes.
Okay? So, But then you can also use the fact that how she adapted and how good she became at being a crew member, you know? And you should, you know, then you could say that,
Okay.
okay? All right. Let's see what else I got to talk about. Anybody have any questions right now? You guys understanding it? It's a really interesting story. All right. Oh, okay, structure. So, we talked about the introduction, the parties you want to talk about. You want to talk about the scene, right? This isn't in Akron, Ohio, is it? It's not at the mall. What's really matter here? What matters on the day of the murder? Yes, Jacob.
She lives with a crew. And
No, what matters on the day of the murder? Yes.
There was a big storm.
Yes, there's a big storm. And what was that? What does that make the whole scene? What?
Very hard to see. No
Yes,
one knows what's going on.
confusing.
A knife could have dropped out of her pocket.
Yes, Michael. Chaotic. Okay? All right.
Could have came from
Flashes of
nowhere.
lightning. Could anybody see?
No.
Right? So you want to use that in your opening statement. Okay? Especially also if you're defense counsel, you're like, nobody could see, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Date, time, and weather. That's one of the things, like I said. So, let's see. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm just trying, I thought I had something I wanted to read to you guys. Oh, here's how a first, let's see, let's get some of you guys to read. How about you? Read first example for the prosecution, this right, this one thing, go ahead.
May it please the court, counsel, members of the jury. This case involves Sharon Jones, who on June 18, 1985, while crossing the street at the intersection of Maple and Oak Street, was struck by a pickup truck driven by the defendant, thrown down on the pavement and killed. How did Sharon Jones come to die that day?
See, really, really succinct. Now I want to know, how did she come to die that day? I want to listen more, okay? All right, so let's have somebody do defendant here. How about you? Okay?
May it please the court, Mr. Singer, members of the jury. Mr. Singer told you part of the story and he told it well. However, if it was as clear as Mr. Singer tells you, there would be no reason for any of us to be here. It's pretty much like the summary of a book on the inside jacket of the cover. Often the summary is incomplete and only tells half the story. I'd like to tell you the other half of this case.
See? It makes you want to, so find something that makes somebody want to turn the page, that makes somebody want to keep listening to what you have to say, instead of just giving us a synopsis of what, you know, what the evidence is, okay? All right. So it says, tell a story about your client, build him up, and make him a human being the jury can relate to and sympathize with, on both sides. You want to make Polybrass somebody that is, you know, it's really sad that we lost this upstanding member of society, and you want to make Charlotte somebody, if you're defending her, that, you know, to cut short her life would be a tragedy, okay? So we talked about, I told you how the scene is really important. You want to describe it. Okay. Date, time, and weather, instrumentality, that's on a ship. Okay. Issue. As defendant, your picture of what happened should be preceded by a denial of the plaintiff's version of the disputed facts of the case that the jury has just heard, or the court has heard. So when I say jury, think about court. How you make your denial is critical. It must be done directly and with conviction. Okay? All right. So when you talk about what happened, remember that you are competing with your opponent to create the more plausible description of how the event actually occurred. As defendant, your primary problem is to persuade the court to see the event your way, the way your evidence shows it really happened. Now, you can, however, state... Okay. You guys have any questions? You guys are understanding what I'm talking about? Let me see if there's anything else. Okay, conclusion. Oh, I know what, you guys need to know what the conclusion is, right? So, remember, at the conclusion, you need to close the sale, you need to make the sell, you need to make the ask. You need to ask the court to do something. I respectfully, on behalf of my co-counsel, I respectfully request that the court find the defendant to not be adjudicated a delinquent child. Or for the prosecution, as a prosecution, on behalf of the state, we respectfully request the child, Charlotte Doyle, to be adjudicated delinquent. Yes.
Are we gonna be using beyond a reasonable doubt again?
That's the burden of proof. Didn't we just talk about, you didn't hear the reasonable doubt standard?
I'm a bit confused.
You did. She read it. Pay attention. Okay. So both plaintiff and defendant should conclude the opening statement by simply and directly telling the court that the facts of the case will support his side or her side and ask for a verdict. So, for example, a plaintiff in a criminal case, after you've heard the evidence, we are confident that you will find the defendant guilty of the count in this indictment. Or, for the defendant in a criminal case, at the conclusion of this case, you will have grave doubts that my client, Frank Jones, was anywhere near the robbery when it occurred. If anything, you will be convinced that someone else did it. Consequently, Frank Jones is simply not guilty of anything. Thank you. The end. Okay, so that would be it. All right. Questions? No questions? This is a fun one. Yes.
So just say who you are, like, who you want to be.
I'm going to pass this around now. So let's see what happens.
Are you able, like, maybe, like, once you've, like, start writing your opening statement, like, is there any way you can switch over? Or, like, once you write it in here, it's written in stone?
I mean, I'd like you to,
Okay.
So go ahead.